Okay, today we're looking at the section 9.5, the first day of it. There will be a second video that goes along with this, but this is the first day. It is on completing the square, and hopefully by the end of this section you can say that I can solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. Okay, so if we just reviewed a little bit how to multiply something like this, so if we just thought of it again, squaring it, it'd be an x plus 3 times an x plus 3. However you want to do that, if you FOIL it or distribute it, you'd get an x squared plus a 3x plus a 3x plus a 9. So you'd end up with x squared plus 6x plus a 9. Okay, if I did this next one, same idea. If you square it, you get an x squared minus a 4x minus a 4x plus a 16. So you'd have x squared minus 8x plus 16. Okay, and then if I did this next one, same idea, x plus 6 times an x plus 6, I'd get an x squared plus a 6, x plus a 6, x plus a 36. So I'd get an x squared plus 12x plus a 36. Okay, if you try the last one, pause the video, try the last one, and you would get x squared minus 14x plus 49. Now, my question becomes, how are these two, the b and the c, related in this special case? Or how are the b and the c related in this special case? Or how are the b and the c related in this special case? Or, in the last one, this special case? Hopefully we can see from when we are multiplying and adding that this last term is simply half of the b squared. So half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9. Half of the b would be half of a negative 8, which is negative 4, squared is a 16. Half of 12 is 6, 6 squared is 36. Half of a negative 14 is a negative 7. Negative 7 squared is a positive 49. So one of the things we're looking at today is how can we complete this square? So these were considered perfect squares because really what does it come from? It comes from the fact that this right here is a perfect square, the same dimensions on each side. So all of these would have had the same dimensions on each side. So how could I create a square that would make this true? Well, if we were thinking back to the previous slide, we were saying we're going to take half of this, half of b, and square it. Okay, so half of b squared, half of 8 is 4, squared would be a 16. Okay, so then this next one. We think of this, half of the negative 12 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is a positive 36. Okay, so now, how are we going to use that? First, you try. Try and find that c term that would create a perfect square. So you should have gotten a 9 here because half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. You should have gotten 81 here because half of a negative 18 is a negative 9. Negative 9 squared is an 81. Okay. So now, how can we use this to solve equations? Well, we're going to use the same idea of completing the square. So we do the half of the 8 would be 4, squared would be 16. But we should realize that if I'm going to do it to one side, I better do it to the other side. So now, what I have is this. I have 196 on this side, and I have created a perfect square, so really I could say that this is an x plus a 4 squared. So, how can I solve that? Well, we really can take a square root of both sides. So I'd have an x plus a 4 equals the square root of 196, which is a positive or negative 14. So, now, to get the x by itself, I simply minus the 4. So what am I left with? I'm left with x equals, you could write it as a negative 4 plus or minus a 14. So what is that? It's negative 4 plus 14, which is a 10. It's negative 4 minus 14, which is a negative 18. So x would be equal to a 10 or a negative 18. Okay, so let's try this next one. For this one, my first step I'd add the 165 to both sides. So I'd have a t squared minus 4t equals 165. And now what we do, we complete that square. So half of a negative 4 is negative 2. Squared though is positive 4. So I'm going to add a 4 to both sides. So what am I left with now? I've now created a perfect square, which would be a t minus 2 squared equals a 169. And then from there, I could take the square root of both sides, and I'd have a t minus 2 equals a positive or negative 1, or 13, excuse me. And then I would simply add the 2 to both sides, and you would get a t equals a positive 13 plus 2 is 15. A negative 13 plus 2 is a negative 11. So those would be my two solutions there. Okay, here's a couple for you to try on your own, and then you should pause the video, try them, and then come back on and I'll explain through them. Okay, so for this one, this one's going to be a little bit different simply because when you take half of 19 is 9.5. So we have to take 9.5 and square it, and 9.5 squared becomes 90.25. So we're going to add on 90.25 to both sides. Okay. So when I get my result, this would be an x minus 9.5 squared equals 156.25. And then if I take the square root of 156.25, the square root of that is a 12.5, so it's a positive negative 12.5. So x minus 9.5 equals positive negative 12.5. But then if I add the 9.5 to both sides, okay, so I'd have x equals a positive 12.5 plus 9.5 would be a 22. A negative 12.5 plus 9.5 gives you a negative 3. So your solutions would be a 22 or a negative 3. Okay, for this one, you should have added 1 to both sides first, and then complete the square, so that would be adding on a 4 and adding on a 4. So this would be t plus 2 squared equals 5. Okay, now if you take the square root of 5, square root of 5 is approximately 2.24. Okay, so I'd have a t plus 2 equals positive negative 2.24. If you minus off the 2, you'd have a t equals a negative 4.24 or a 0.24. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to us. If not, again, come with questions tomorrow, but that is a wrap.